Welcome to TLDR IPCC. My name is Jan Raes and I work as a sustainability advisor for ABN AMRO Bank in the Netherlands. You're joining me at Circle in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and we'll take you through the contents of the latest IPCC report. If you're wondering what the IPCC report is, it's actually a consensus document, a compilation if you want, of all scientific knowledge on what we need to do to tackle climate change. And in fact, it's double the size of the book on the table. This is 1,500 pages. It's a 3,000 page report, and I've been doing some summary reading for you, and I'm summarizing it in 8 fact snacks. So let me start with fact snack number 1. We are not on track. It's that simple. We're not on track for 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming by the end of the century. Even worse, all greenhouse gases are not on track. Not only CO2, but all its equivalents are growing with the growth of our economies. And to make things more complicated, the distribution of that growth across continents and across countries is uneven. It's not an equal starting point, and that is my fact snack number 2. So what you see really is that high-income countries and low-income countries have a very different point of departure to tackle climate change. If we take West Africa, it's going to be in the left-hand lower corner of the graph, and it lacks some of the human development features that we see in high-income countries. What are we talking about? We're talking about access to education, mobility, security, healthcare. It's that simple. Those things should not be sacrificed for the sake of CO2 emissions, right? So those countries need to follow a trajectory that they are improving their human development for their citizens, and all the while sticking with a lower growth of their carbon emissions. The game has been played in high-income countries. We have access to most of these services, good access to mobility, education, healthcare, and better safety for humans, but at the cost of many CO2 emissions. So just be aware, if you read those graphs, the trajectories for those types of countries, low and middle income countries on the one hand, and high income countries on the other hand, are very different. That means policy is different. Fact fact number 3. The money is simply not doing what our policymakers are saying. The private money doesn't invest in R&D, and it actually works until towards the date of commercial availability, when the R&D has been done. And you would expect that public money is different from private money that actually needs to take into account the returns to, for example, pensioners, if we're talking about pension funds. But the public money isn't actually doing the right thing either. The policymakers are simply not putting their money where their mouth is. And that is proven by a graph in the IPCC report, where we see that after the 2 oil crises, there was a spike in spending on R&D and innovation for energy solutions. Low carbon energy solutions, that is what we need. But that slumped, and we see actually the slump in the graph, and we're only right now getting to the same level as after those 2 oil crises. So think about that. If the crisis is so urgent, we should be much higher. We should be doing much more spending on inventing the things that will get us away from the high carbon economic growth that we're going through right now to a lower or a zero carbon economic growth. Fact fact number 4. Are we covered by legislation? Now, if you read the first graph, you might think we are not. And in fact, we need to be covered by more parliamentary democratically voted laws that take nations into a trajectory where they have obliged themselves by law to decarbonize. If you look at that graph, we're only around 50% coverage of global greenhouse gas emissions. What's better news is just behind that in the IPCC report. If you look at the coverage of the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol, which are more multilateral agreements, those cover really up to 90% or more of global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's very promising. But the trajectory of ratifying the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol, that is really lagging, and that is obviously a very important factor to put down into law what we need to do to decarbonize our economies. Fact number 5, a glimmer of hope. While humans are the cause, we are also the solution. We can change our behavior. If you think of it, then a lot of stuff we do can be avoided, shifted, or improved. And that's the logic that the IPCC has really worked on. And that's where a lot of science supports how we can change our human behavior to actually decarbonize our consumption and production. Now, a fun fact in there is that keeping less pets is as effective as less travel in an airplane. So think about that. I'm not saying that IPCC, they are not policy descriptive, is saying away with all the pets or stop traveling. What they're saying, they're trying to make you conscious that you could reduce, or if you're considering taking a pet for all good reasons, that it also establishes a carbon footprint. And the same goes for taking one less long-haul flight if you're considering doing that more than once a year. Fact snack number 6. What the IPCC is saying about a just transition is that we also need to look at the decency level of the services we provide to our citizens. If you look, for example, at the floor space for an average Indian person or an average Dutch person, the conclusions are very different. Floor space in general, although some might disagree, in the Netherlands, for all the 70 million inhabitants of the Netherlands, is above the decency level. So the policies that are needed to drive climate change are really different than those in India, where the inequality crosses the decency level. The floor space for poor Indians might not be sufficient or considered decent. That means that actually in policy, the climate change policy will be intertwined with fighting poverty. And the India-Netherlands example serves as a great example. Fact snack number 7, a glimmer of hope. While the ultimate technology has not been invented yet to tackle climate change, we do see 2 things in common of technologies that do make it and that are built for purpose to decarbonize our consumption. Think about solar panels, think about wind turbines, think about heat pumps. They actually have 2 characteristics that the IPCC repeats in their report, which is falling unit cost and a spectacular rate of adoption in line with the falling unit costs. A great example of that is, for example, when Einstein proved in 1905, I think he won the Nobel Prize back then, when he proved that a photon, a light particle from the sun, can transform into an electron, which is useful to people to produce electricity. He didn't know how to build a solar panel yet. It took us about 100 years to get those in the shops. We can now go to the shop, buy a solar panel, put it on our roof. I think that time period of 100 years can shrink to potentially a decade and maybe in the future 2 years, just like we've seen with the vaccine development. It took decades, and in the end, to get a corona vaccine, while not perfect, it was there in a couple of years instead of the decades that it used to take to develop vaccines. How fast are we able to learn? We see that the smaller units that can be put to the task of decarbonization, like solar panels, heat pumps, and the smaller wind turbines, those actually have huge learning curves. So the more we experiment around the globe, the steeper the learning curve, and actually the better for the falling unit cost and the mass adoption. The larger experiments, like safe nuclear power or concentrated solar plants, those take more investment, more time, they're way more complex. And also because there are less instances or examples of them around the planet, they actually take a longer time to grow to maturity and to really start falling in unit cost. The last fact snack, number 8, that the IPCC report offers is I am at the moment in Circle, which is built according to circular economy principles. And we are in the Netherlands that has a circular economy ambition by 2030 and 2050. But this country, while it's already above 20% circular, so to say, how could it potentially go to 80% circular? Well, then the climate transition is really the key. And you can see that in the graph. Actually, the climate policy and technology that we are developing today to decarbonize our economies are the preconditions to actually start speaking about and dreaming of an 80% circular economy. So just be aware that those two transitions, circular economy and climate, are very intimately intertwined. If you've made it this far in the video, you might be interested in reading the article that we've written for you with the backgrounds to the graphs in this video. It will take another 50 minutes of your lifetime to get through the article, but it will give you the insights that actually help you to maybe decarbonize your personal life or to address your policymakers in your area to work on decarbonization of our societies. All that's left for me is to thank you for your attention and thank you for being with us. See you next time.